Welcome to the Research Like a Pro question and answer series, and today I'll be sharing about how to narrow down a broad genealogical research objective by locality. And I give an example from my own research where there was a lot of future research to do, and I decided to focus the project by just choosing one of the areas geographically that needed more research to be done. And so I'll talk a little bit about why that's helpful and how it helps you to do your locality research, as well as have all of the research plan be focused in one place. And in this particular instance, it's a particular state, so Arkansas, two counties in the northern part of Arkansas. And this can be helpful if you have a lot of work to do on a particular project and you want to focus down just one phase of the research to have a very narrow objective and dive deep into the records instead of finding surface records at multiple locations. This is an excerpt from our recent Research Like a Pro office hours session, and hopefully it will help you to um, think more about how you can narrow down your objectives. So I want to share a tip about research objectives. And one of the common challenges in making a research objective is that what you want to know about one of your ancestors might be too broad for just one phase of research, especially for your first project where you don't want it to be a really long research report. So trying to narrow that down can often be a challenge. So for example, with my Sally Keaton research that I recently did, I wanted to know what happened to her after her marriage because in her father's estate proceedings, she was listed as living outside of the state and she wasn't ever given her share of the estate. And so it said she lived in Tennessee at one point, and I didn't know where within Tennessee. So I really wanted to trace her entire family forward in time to find out if she had children, see where she died, where she lived throughout her life. And that was a lot that I wanted to know. And so it was too broad. So that was one challenge with that. And the reason why this can be a challenge is because we all have limited time for spending with our research. And if possible, it's best to approach the research in manageable chunks or phases where we break it up. So the solution that we often teach here at Research Like a Pro is to break the research into focused phases. And so with my research question, what happened to Sally? The problem was that what I wanted to know was too broad, what happened to her after her marriage. And that was a bit overwhelming. And when I first started researching as a professional and kind of learned how to set an objective, I chose an objective that was really broad and included multiple people and multiple places in a long time period. And it was a real challenge to write the report because I felt very scattered as far as how to organize things. And I felt like I was writing three reports because there were three brothers involved. And so with Sally, it turned out that she moved to multiple states and the research spanned many decades. Another challenge with a broad research objective like this is that you don't know when you're done. It's harder to know because the question is so broad. You could find one thing that happened to her after her marriage and say you're done, or you could find everything that happened to her. And that's kind of what I wanted to know was everything. So with these broad objectives, one of the challenges is that you'll waste time chasing every um, state that Sally lived in, and you won't be able to focus. You'll have a lot of surface records without being able to go deep into the locality research and feel like you've figured out all the records that might mention that person and check them. So, looking back on how my research progressed, it's easy to see how it was broken down into manageable phases. And so let's go over that. And then I'll give you some tips for if you're starting at the beginning, how do you break it into manageable phases without knowing where it will go? So I ended up um, creating the overarching question was what happened to Sally Keaton after her marriage? And phase one was to establish her 1830 location. And so she lived in Tennessee in 1830 and then moved to Mississippi and then to Arkansas. And so I found all these places that she lived. And this first phase was kind of a survey of the low hanging fruit as far as easy census records and things that I could find. And I did figure out where she lived in Tennessee in 1830. Then in phase two, that one ended up being a real focus on identifying who her children were and using DNA evidence to figure that out. Because she did have a lot of descendants who were DNA matches to um, her sister Lucinda's descendants, who I am a descendant of. And so the conclusion is that in that phase, I found many of her children. They were located through finding marriage records in Tennessee and Mississippi, and some sources in Arkansas. And this phase really served as a deep dive into the Mississippi records, the DNA evidence, and really focusing on proving each of the children's relationship to the parents. And then I could have been done there, but I felt like I needed to look into Arkansas where she died. I It was a burned county there in Izard County, and so I really wanted to just do a final short documentary phase to dive into that Arkansas research and to see if there's anything I was missing there. And there were a few things I was missing. Unfortunately, I didn't find anything specific about when and where she died beyond a range of years and that she probably died in Izard County. But I did find some more about her fan club. One of her sons-in-law had many records there in Izard County, and I thought he had died by 1870. And I also found the motivations for moving to Izard County. And so this was a deep dive into those burned counties in Arkansas where she lived in Izard and Fulton County, and finding more details about her children and descendants there. So looking back on this research, I can see how one phase really led to the next, and breaking it down by location was very helpful for diving deep into that place's records. Now, if you're wanting to do the same thing and break down your research into phases, you don't need to know what all the phases will be at the beginning. When you're starting, you can just brainstorm what the next best step will be for moving the project forward. So, for example, I wanted to know what happened to Sally, but I couldn't trace her past her father's estate and probate proceedings in South Carolina, where she was listed as living in outside South Carolina with her husband, William Reeves. And the next best step I could think of was, where did she live in 1830? Because there was a census that year, and I thought maybe I could track William Reeves down. So often this first project is kind of a survey, finding that low-hanging fruit, the easy records that can help you outline the next research steps that you need to do, and then start planning for the next few phases. So organizing our research objectives into phase works because each phase has a clear endpoint. You know when you've answered that specific question or you've exhausted all the potential resources. Like in my Arkansas phase, I looked at everything I could think of to find her death records, and her burial record just said after 1880 for her death. And so there wasn't really anything to narrow it down. Each phase informs the next. So what you find in phase one will help you narrow your search area for phase two. You can see, oh, I need to do more in this place within Mississippi or Arkansas. Breaking it into phases helps you make steady progress. Even if phase three remains unsolved, you've at least documented phases one and two. And it's less overwhelming. So tackling where in 1830 is manageable, but trying to find her whole life story is not. And it will make it harder for you to find anything because you'll be searching for just those surface records instead of diving deep into the locality research. All right, so phases. I hope that was helpful to think about organizing research in phases. And um, I know this is something that seem challenging up front, but my one final takeaway for this is to don't try to plan all your phases at once. Just let the first phase guide the second phase and so forth.